Well, hello everybody, and welcome to TFT Tinfoil Talk. And today we are going to be doing Walt Disney, one of the great American heroes, of course. And we're going to be talking about a little bit about his life, and we're going to be taking different angles on it. And we're also going to be trying to debunk some of the ridiculous conspiracy theories that follow around this wonderful man. And of course, as you guys know, we do have a bunch of links down below. Please go and check those out and involve yourself with what we're doing. Of course, we have my Twitter account, DM where you can contact me if you want to be on the show. We'd love to have you guys. Also, keep in mind if you want to be part of the Drone Recorded Fan Edition, is another way. Just get in touch with me. And I will go through the process and get you involved in getting on there and letting us see your wonderful abilities. But other than that, we also have our fan speak on Facebook. If you're not part of that community, please make yourself part of it. It's growing, and we have a lot of people interacting with reviews and ideas and all kinds of stuff. It's really, very, really fun to see what's going on in the community there. And also keep in mind that Denali's very own Immortal Mask mailing list is down below, so definitely check that out. We appreciate you guys, and of course, hitting that sub button and that like button is wonderful. We definitely are growing. We're up to 750 people now on our sub, which is awesome. But being a
Oh
live
my
streamer is the
god,
thing. Yeah, it is
crazy.
awesome. Yeah, the thing that helps us the most actually is hitting that share button and let your family and friends and extended community know what we're doing so they come and join us live. But let me come over here and say hello to the panel we got, and I'm going to start, of course, with the most amazingly oiled and flightless bird that is Booster. Hello,
It's
dude.
me, it's Booster. Wow, we're going to really get these damn commies. I don't
Yeah,
like communists.
no,
And
no,
they
no,
don't like Walt Disney.
no,
I
they
don't
don't.
I don't think we're gonna be receiving many Disneyland fun bucks for talking about this one. We're not shilling much at all. The
N-
mouse doesn't want to talk about this.
I haven't. I imagine that's true.
It's
But
like,
we're going to
hey,
talk about it
you better
because
quit it.
oh,
I don't like this.
that's not the first time we'll hear that today. I'm afraid, guys, and I do
Yahoo!
apologize. All right, and of course we're also joined by Dinale, the very one and only Dinale, the Dinale Llama himself. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing awesome here. Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us on TFT, where we're talking about Disney. We struck a nerve and we're going to see it through. And yeah, join my newsletter for the Immortal Mass. The project's going along just great. I'm excited to see seeing all the work that we've been doing, the progress we've been making, and I can't wait to show it off. But until it's ready, you know, it's like baking a cake. You wait until it's ready and it's good and ready to come out.
That's
So
true. That is true. That's the way. That's how you cook properly. Mark, if you could do me a favor, please, and send that link over to Tim. I did send him one, but it seems like it's not working. Can you send the link I gave you over to him so he can get in here, please? Mark? Mark's not responding. Uh, I'll try to get that over to you in a second, Tim. Let me see
Oh,
here.
I'm doing what I can.
Oh yeah, take if you can take care of it. He needs it on the email. I sent it to the email. But anyway, Dr. Wright, welcome, sir. Nice to see you on here.
Hey. Sorry, I muted myself. Welcome, and thank you for having me in today.
Oh no
Hopefully,
problem.
I won't be too lightheaded.
Right. But I think it's going to be a fun conversation. We just lost Mark as well. I wonder why. But we'll see. We'll hopefully get him back. Yeah, there he is. He came back. Can we hear from you, Mark?
Pellegrini!
Mark? He's having
Yeah, just
troubles. Oh, there you go.
can you hear me?
I can hear
Okay,
you
yeah,
now.
I just reset my
It's okay.
headset.
No
Okay.
Disney assassins will come after you. We promise.
They
No need
might.
to be
Nah, it looks
afraid.
like
You
I had to
should.
reset my headset. It was set to headphones.
The
Oh,
mouse
You can
might
hear me
though.
I see.
now, though, right?
I can hear
I've
you
got you
fine.
in my sights.
If you can do me a favor, Mark, and send that link to Tim. I sent it to the email, but it seems not to be working for him. If you could help us out with that, please.
Sure, I'll try. It's the Hangouts though that Tim sent me is the one that I used, so he should have the link. But I'll give it a shot.
That's
See if
interesting
he does.
because I sent it to both of you. But yeah, see if you can send that back to him. I don't know why he's having trouble, but we'll try to figure it out. Usually, when it goes to the email, it's easier to do. If you could send it in the email, maybe that would be helpful. But
Sure.
anyway, you take care of that, and I'm going to move down the line. We are joined also by Gary Shipman, has come on to talk about Walt Disney. Hey, doing Gary?
I am doing well. How are you?
I am awesome. A long time no talk, dude. But nice
It
to
is,
have you on
yeah.
today. Now, you know a little
Yeah.
bit about Disney. I mean, you certainly have done some work for Disney, I believe.
Yeah, I've been an independent contractor for Disney. I actually did work as an independent contractor with Disney Publishing, a
Mhm.
division of Disney Publishing called Disney English. And I got to draw a lot of Mickey hands.
I see. There you go. That's cool.
What's
But
with the gloves? Can we discuss the conspiracy around the gloves?
Sure.
what
That's got to be a conspiracy,
is that? Is that where
some
you
kind of
want to
slave
start?
thing. Yeah,
No,
not really,
definitely
but
no, Booster.
If it
Be
doesn't
good.
fit, you must have quit. Right?
mm-hmm.
I've never heard any such a thing. But thank you for being on here, Gary. Of course, guys, we are also joined by George. How you doing, George?
Greetings, everybody. I am so happy to all of you to be here to challenge me.
To challenge you. Yes. Now, keep in mind, guys, that earlier in the week we were having a show, and dastardly George here said horrible, horrible things about Walt Disney, and the entire chat just laid into him hard. He then came back and tried to soften it by saying, "Oh, I was talking about the Disney Corporation, not Walt Disney himself." But we all know that's a lie. George is going to be the antagonist of today, I'm sure.
I'm going to be pulling heartstrings and chewing them up.
All right, there you go. So
We're going to
George is the
sell
bad
the
guy.
rights to this to Disney for an Oscar award-winning movie.
Goodness
The
gracious.
destruction of George is going to be sad.
Epic.
I'll be
Epic.
holding him as we lie in the rain.
All right.
Says his final words.
Booster, why don't you go ahead and say hello to Mark? And I'm going to try to do that link or email over to Tim again. If you take care of that
Hello.
real quick.
Oh, hello, Mark.
Hey, what's going on, man? Yeah, I've tried sending Tim the link. He just replied and said the link's not working for him, so maybe he needs it again. I don't know what his deal is.
Oh,
What do
well,
you know of Walt Disney?
let me grab this real quick without being absolutely doxing myself. Probably too late. But let me come over and I'm going to try it again and see how it goes. Mark, nice to have you over here. Are you a Disney fan, dude?
I am actually quite a bit. I was just refurbishing my old Disney Treasures tins and trying to figure out which discs had died on me or not. So I've been watching a lot of the old shorts lately to see which ones still worked. So yeah, I'm actually a big fan.
I see. Well, I'm doing a bunch of stupid things over here, I think. That's the reason why I
Mamma
can't do
mia.
it. Oh, you're in here. Okay, good. Goodness gracious. A rabbit has appeared.
Yes.
Uh,
And happy birthday to you.
happy birthday to
Who's singing
you.
that?
It'll be Mickey Mouse. Happy birthday.
Oh, God, that's
Oh my
wrong.
gosh.
That's
Oh,
wrong.
thank you.
That's wrong, dude. Oh, that felt bad. I do apologize, Gary. Booster is a very bad boy. Okay, we got it solved. So let me stop doxing myself left and right, which I'm doing as a boomer. I am. But nevertheless, we got everybody
Chester
in here.
Busby is doxing himself as Chester Busby.
Well, I mean, giving out links and stuff like that. Yeah, no,
Don't tell everyone Tim Lim's real name, for goodness sake.
yeah, don't tell him, man. It's weird, there is two groups of people over here. You got people like me and Gary and Tim and Mark even that we use our own name without any. I'm assuming it's your real names. I use my real name, but then we got the other side that are hiding themselves.
Well, that's because no one wanted to call me James.
Well, that's probably true. Booster
The
is
Americans
better.
are so weird with the name James, you just didn't want to do it. It's like, oh, hey, Jim, Jimmy, Jim Bob.
We don't want
Jimbo.
to call you James because you don't have a bond.
That's true. That's true.
I guess. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. But anyway, guys, we are here to talk about Walt Disney. Now, as usual on this show, TFT, what I'm going to do is going to give just kind of introduction to the subject. Then I'm going to let each person here give their own little presentations if they prepare one or give their own points. We also do something on the show we usually don't do, where we go to an actual internet page, which the guys talk me into using the DuckDuckGo now, I guess. And I will do searches live. I'm doing it live. And it's a bit quite different than we usually do, but I think it's a lot of fun. First, let me kind of go over here and do our little quick introduction that we have. All right. So now, as you guys know, Walt Disney is a very famous person, and of course, the conspiracy theories that surround him and Disney in general are numerous. There are just go on YouTube, and there's like what 1,000 videos. Of course, the thing about Walt Disney that I'm here to talk about, and everyone else here is, other than George, to defend, is the fact that I say that Walt Disney was an American hero, and he did a lot of things to help people, and he was great to his workers, even though they rebelled against him, and et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get into it all, I'm sure. I don't want to take up too much of the other people's presentations they might have. But just to introduce, of course, this is Walt Disney sitting here in front of the piano. Of course, him introducing music is very big part of his life. I mean, his little silly symphonies is one of the first things he did. He did that quite early. He was one of the first people to really introduce music and sound into animation. He's also one of the people that helped to pioneer the cell shading, the using cells and stuff to make animation, where before there was more of a stop motion type of thing. And of course, Walt Disney was born in the turn of the century in 1901, December, I believe. He was in the war. He was basically driving an ambulance, and he wanted to get in his career. And like I said, I don't want to step on the toes of these other guys, but he did a lot of stuff, and he really pushed hard. And it took him quite a while. And one of the first real successes he had was, of course, Waldo the Lucky Rabbit. And now, Waldo was something that he created, and in the end, he couldn't hold the rights to it because it was something that I believe Universal were the ones who owned it. I'm pretty sure it was Universal. It might have been Warner Brothers, but no, I think it's Universal. And he couldn't hold the rights to that, and he ended up getting kind of laid off. They kept his friend Ub, who is, of course, did most of the animation for Disney, actually, for Mickey Mouse particularly. But he did go on, and he created his own character with Ub, who went with him, and he ended up, of course, creating Mickey Mouse, the legend. And from that, he was able to build and build and do all kinds of stuff. And of course, his first real super big success was the movie Snow White, and it was a mega hit. And actually, everything after that, even though you might prefer Dumbo or Peter Pan or all the other things he did, nothing really kind of came up to that Snow White. Snow White was a big, big, big hit, especially for the time. And but he kept pushing, and of course, he had the idea to open up an amusement park, which his shareholders and stuff were certainly not happy about the idea at all. But he pushed, and he got it done. And of course, he died before he saw it come to fruition. But he did put the Disney World in works, and of course, we've seen Disney take it from there, whether in a good way or a bad way. They have continued his dream. And of course, another real important point that I want to add personally is one of the things that a lot of people don't really talk much about with Disney is he was a major family man. He loved kids. He loved his family. He was just doted on his daughters like crazy. And now, of course, one of these girls here is actually his real daughter, but he and his wife sadly had several miscarriages, and they had a real hard time having a baby, and that was a lot of stress on them. But eventually they did, and then they ended up adopting another one. So one of these is an adopted daughter, the other one is his natural daughter, but he treated them both the same nevertheless. Disney was a great family man up until the very end. Even though he was an incredibly busy guy, he literally took them to school every day and picked them up as well. This is Walt Disney. And I've truncated it. I've not covered anywhere near the amount of details that I could get into with Disney, but I just wanted to give a general introduction. Great man, great American, and I'm sure we'll get into all the other wartime stuff and communist stuff here shortly. But let me come back over to our panel, and who wants to take the first shot? Who wants to go and give us their opinions or give their presentation or what have you? Raise your hand.
Mark.
Mark does.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm going to start. All right, sure. Yeah. So we talk about him being a great American and how much he disliked commies, and a lot of that is true. And you can read stories of it, and exactly how true it is depending on who you ask and who wrote the story. The BBC did an unauthorized documentary on Walt Disney that was just an absolute takedown of the man. And they interviewed a lot of disgruntled classic animators and employees who just had nothing nice to say about him. And then there's that old like biography about him, where they basically called him pure evil. And that's where a lot of the stuff about him being an anti-Semite and a racist and
Mhm.
just a nasty person comes from. But the truth is that he was an ultra patriot, and you can discern what you want out of that. Some people say like, oh, a patriot is a bad thing, or some people say a patriot's a good thing. But he loved his country.
Yeah, he did.
And there's one story that I absolutely love, and I think it's the reason why Tim brought me on here is because it's one of my favorite stories about Walt Disney and his patriotism. Was during the era of the Red Scare, McCarthy actually appointed Walt Disney as a secret FBI agent within Hollywood as an informant to find all the commies that were hidden in Hollywood at the time. And he so one thing he did not like was he did not like unions. And
Mm.
during the time Dumbo was being animated, his animators went on strike to get unionized, and he was not happy about that. And a lot of people associated unions with communism, and he did as well. And so a lot of the people he identified as communists to McCarthy and the House of Un-American Activities were the union organizers within his ranks.
Yeah.
But it continued. After all that, he never really let go of anything that could possibly be considered like a communist in association with Disney. And it almost turned into paranoia at times. So in the 50s and 60s, there was a style of animation that became really popular called the UPA style. UPA was a studio that did shorts like Gerald McBoing Boing and Mr. Magoo, and they had a very simplified, almost cutout style, like a proto Hanna-Barbera style. And it was very popular, and it was very cheap to animate, and so it was very attractive for studios. And a Disney animator named Tom Orub experimented with the UPA style on the Disney characters, and he did a series of car commercials for a brand of car called the Nash in 1955. And he had a UPA style Mickey Mouse, which was done in this hyper angular look. And they did a bunch of commercials with Mickey and Minnie and Pluto, all talking about how great the 1955 Nash was. And then one day, Walt got a letter, supposedly from a 12-year-old boy. It was probably written by his parents, but the letter basically read like, "Dear Walt Disney, I love your cartoons, but I am disappointed to find out that you're a filthy commie after seeing your 1955 Nash commercial and its communist propaganda art style. I hate you. Goodbye." And Walt absolutely flipped out at that letter, and he went downstairs to Tom Orub's department, which was the animation department specifically assigned to doing commercial animation,
Mhm.
and he dissolved that department on the spot. He said, "All of you are out. You're all fired. This department's dissolved. We're not doing any more commercial animation." And they never did another commercial or another anything with the Tom Orub style Mickey because he was that dedicated to his identity as a patriotic American. So that even a letter from supposedly a 12-year-old saying that he supported communism with his UPA style animation was enough to make him flip out because he absolutely never wanted that to be associated with who he was, his brand, or his identity. And that was who Walt Disney was. He was aggressively American. And some people might find that hilarious or stupid or offensive or respectable. I actually think that it's just half a century later, it's actually pretty funny to think that he would flip out over a letter from a little kid and then dissolve an entire department of his studio.
Mhm. Well, the communist angle, would anyone like to elaborate on that a little bit?
McCarthy was right.
Well, other than that, no, I meant
Well,
specifically with Walt Disney. I know the
well,
answer, but maybe somebody else wants to talk about why specifically he was very much against communism and how the whole union strike happened. Would someone like to elaborate? No. Okay. Basically, what happened was when Walt Disney was starting to make a lot of money off the things he was doing, and he's building up his studio. He was actually very free with his money. One of the things that's well known is the nanny that helped his wife take care of the kids actually became quite wealthy because he gave her so much money to do her job. But he was like this with everybody. He wanted everyone to have a living wage. He wanted to help everybody as much as he could. And what happened was, of course, he had all his animators, but now he's expanding and he has all kind of other workers that are coming on. And eventually, later on, it went to the amusement park as well. But what he was doing was everybody he brought on, he was paying really well, basically the same amount of money he was paying the animators. And the animators, they took offense to this. I mean, how dare you pay them the same as us? We're the ones that make this place work. And they didn't understand that from Walt Disney's point of view, he just wanted everyone to have money in their pockets so they could be happy and successful. That's all. But they took it differently, and they got very upset, and that's why they went on strike. And Disney felt extremely betrayed by this because he was paying them really well too, and he doesn't understand why they turned his back on him. And of course, we do. If you do any kind of study into unions, particularly in the early 20th century, they're absolutely inundated by communism. That is one of the things that communists did to try to spread communism, was spreading the union. Whether you go back to the industrial age and we saw the use of the union actually helping people, it became a communist tool. So he's not lying. There were communists actually involved in unionization, but mainly he felt it as a betrayal. But when he came up later in those hearings and he gave that incredible speech he did, which you can go find online, I'm sure, and he basically is pointing out a lot of the people involved in his own animators being involved in communism stuff. I think it was a bit of the fact that there were communists in there, but it was also a little bit of he was heartbroken, and I think he was striking back a little bit. But just to kind of add to what Mark has said here, that's a little bit more background into how that all happened.
I wanted to bring up something that you mentioned with Iworks. So
Yeah.
the whole thing with, like, anytime you read any biography or documentary that's negative towards Walt Disney, a lot of times they'll cherry pick, and one of the things that they'll cherry pick is quotes from Iworks. Now, he was definitely Walt's right-hand man, helped him come up with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. He was with him during the early years of the Disney Corporation, and then at some point he left. He was actually pretty disgruntled. He went to work for Universal, as you said, and a lot of biographers will cherry pick the sentences or the phrases he said that were fairly negative towards Walt. Now, the part that a lot of people won't mention is the fact that over a period of time, he got screwed by Universal and a lot of the companies he worked for. So his post-Disney tenure was not as rosy on the other side as he thought. He came back to Walt, and
did.
Walt felt betrayed by him, but he hired him back with no strings attached. And so towards the end of his life, he had positive things to say about him. And I think even after Walt died, I think there was a great deal of remorse in the idea that our hindsight tends to be better. And because our hindsight is better, it was this idea that no, there was a lot of weirdness in the very beginning, probably some pettiness, probably some jealousy, but in the end, even Iwerks could not deny that he was a good man. So if you're ever reading a biography about Walt and you see quotes from Iwerks, it's always good to contextualize it with the statements he made later regarding him, because he could have just kicked him to the curb if he was a worse person, but he didn't. He remembered that he was his friend. He remembered how he basically helped him get started with Oswald. Honestly, if we didn't have Oswald, we wouldn't have had Mickey. It really took Universal screwing them over with the Oswald property for Walt to actually come up with what is now the flagship character of the corporation.
Well, Walt was he was actually a very forgiving man. And while a lot of these stories about him and his commie smashing days, make it sound like he held some psychotic grudges, that doesn't really gel with some of the other stories that are a bit more documented. Like his rival in those early black and white days was the Fleischer Studio that worked for Paramount, and they did the Popeye cartoons and the Betty Boop cartoons. And eventually, the Fleischers, Max, Dave, Charles Fleischer, they had a falling out with Paramount. Paramount fired them all, and then hired Famous Studios to do the Popeye cartoons and a bunch of other cartoons. When the Fleischers were turned out from Paramount, Disney hired them, Walt did, and he didn't hold any ill will. He understood that it was all just professional competition, that they were the best at their jobs in the whole country, and then he brought them on, And Richard Fleischer, who was Max Fleischer's son, was one of the directors of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
I mean, if Disney was as psychotic with his grudges as a lot of people make it sound like, then he would have given the Fleischers the finger and set them to the bread line, but he didn't.
Yeah. No,
that's not good business.
No, and it's a very good point because actually, I think in the end, Walt and we are very lucky that Universal screwed him out of Oswald because it taught him a really good lesson when he went forward. And I think one of the things with Ub though is the fact that Walt told him not to go over to Universal. He said they're going to screw you. Don't do it. And he didn't listen. And of course, Walt turned out to be correct, and maybe there was a little bit of not wanting to accept one's mistakes involved in some of those comments as well. But no, that's a very good point, guys. Excellent points.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about Ub. When he went over to Universal after he left Walt Disney Studios, he was feeling he wasn't treated fairly. Ub was actually the workhorse of those early black and white days. They said he could turn out the pencils for a full-length cartoon short in 2 weeks, which is amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
And he felt like he wasn't being, compensated fairly or given the proper credits, even though he was credited in all of his cartoons. But when he went over to Universal, which, step one, that was an FU to Walt because Universal was the one that took Oswald from Walt, so that was Walt's enemy, and he went over to Universal. But the cartoons he made for Universal, if you look them up, a lot of them are just direct knockoffs of Disney cartoons. Like he did. Ub was the one who animated the Skeleton Dance for Silly Symphonies.
Yeah.
And he animated one called The Skeleton Frolic for Universal, which is the exact same cartoon.
Yeah.
He did The Haunted House, which was a Mickey Mouse cartoon for Disney. When he went over to Universal, he did a Flip the Frog cartoon, which was just a direct copy right down to the gags and even tracing some of his old animation for Universal. Like he was trying to antagonize Walt Disney when he went over to Universal. Like he was a very salty individual about it.
He was, yeah.
And even after all of that, Walt still accepted him back and no hard feelings. And when Ub came back, Ub didn't come back as an animator. He came back more as an innovator. And he helped design and create the multi-plane camera, which was a huge innovation for animation techniques at the time. So Walt still saw worth in him, and even after him, Ub going over to his enemy territory and doing all these rip-off cartoons, he still invited him back with open arms and accepted all the innovations he brought to the company because he still saw his value. So Walt was a forgiving person. Maybe he required the person who he felt betrayed him to come back and apologize first, but he accepted the apology and he invited them back. Yeah. So that says a lot about his character, and that's more that can be proven than some of the stories that go around of him being kind of an ogre and a nasty individual.
Yeah, it is odd, isn't it? And those, skeletons and of course, Haunted House, those things, as old as they are, they still stand up. They are still amazing.
Oh, they're fantastic! I love them.
They are. But there's a question here from the chat.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that the more technology we get for animation, the worse animation quality we get, just pumped out faster?
Well,
I just find it quite funny.
Well, I think CG just doesn't match up to the hand-drawn stuff, unfortunately. It will, maybe one day it will. There is a question here from the chat. I'd like someone in the chat to grab a hold of and answer, and maybe several of you. Joe Morone says, "What am I dying to know is why Family Guy keeps repeatedly depicting Disney as a Jew hater. Couldn't find anything to justify their claims."
That's one of the things that I think sparked this conversation, isn't it? Because Seth MacFarlane is constantly having to poke fun at jokes for Walt Disney for being an anti-Semite, which, that's all bullcrap that came out of the whole... what was the anti-communist guy again? The list?
McCarthy.
McCarthy. But it's not really starts with McCarthy.
McCarthyism.
No, doesn't start with McCarthyism. Starts in World War II. During the height of that, before we enter the war. This is where I answer. This is where it'll come, where the rumor started with the anti-Semites. Basically, the first part of that is a lot of people assume that Mickey Mouse was a caricatures of the Jewish people, because a lot of caricatures for Jewish was a mouse or a rat. So they attributed that to the Jewish. That's the first part, but that's proven untrue very much so. That it had nothing to do with the Jews.
Doesn't it say a lot about you when you point at something and go, "Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's making fun of me." Doesn't it say a lot about the stereotypes you put on yourself? So, oh, geez, they're making fun of me again. Oh gosh.
But the second part actually comes from accusations from Art. Let me see. It was from Art Barrett, Babelet, who was saying that he had strong interest or sympathy to the German American Bund, which was founded by Fritz Kahn. Fritz Kahn was a part of this German-led Nazi sympathizer that actually met up Adolf Hitler right before America entered wars, and they were using, pro-Nazi propagandas and was trying to entice Disney to join up, which, as everybody's been saying, Disney would not have done that. But another one of it's attributed because he had meetings and this is something like that. That's what Art was saying, but there's nothing really documenting that he has done it. It's just a disgruntled worker, throwing slander at Disney because of his success. Also, another rumor that popped up was Lenny Riefenstahl, which was a female. Riefenstahl, sorry. Yeah. Which was a German filmmaker who helped do the documentaries glorifying the Nazi, did the Christianaut, which was basically the documentaries that opened up for the Nazi Olympics as well. And Disney was known to be saying that he liked how she filmed that, not that he had sympathy for. So that also attributed to a lot of anti-Semite rumors that he was a secret Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer. So that's where the rumor comes from. And that's why he had Family Guys,
Well, it's one of those rumors that's like it's fun to carry on that joke, and a lot of people can mine a lot of edgy humor out of it. Whether it's true or not is kind of immaterial at this point, especially if you're talking Family Guy and all the jokes they do. It's more about does it service the joke, whether it's true or not, and that's what they go with.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back, one of the big pieces of evidence people throw out, that Disney was an anti-Semite, is the Three Little Pigs Silly Symphony short. And in the original version of that short, the big bad wolf tries to get into the brick house where the three little pigs are by disguising himself as a Jewish door-to-door salesman. And he's got a big nose, and he's like, "I'm the brush man, here to sell brushes. Come on out, little pigs." And he looks like a Jewish caricature. But the joke is that Jews don't eat pork. So, of course, pigs wouldn't be afraid of a Jew. I mean, that's the context of that joke. And yes, it's a caricature of what Jewish people look like at the time, but watch every other Disney short from that time. If they had an Italian, the Italian, was like, "Hey, mamma mia," and doing like a big overblown impression. If they had a German, he was wearing he was wearing lederhosen and going, "Mein Gott im Himmel." Like that was just the way they did it.
Yeah, the Duff
exactly,
fear face.
So. Yeah, the Führer's face. I mean, that was a takedown of Nazi Germany. How can you say that Walt Disney was, an anti-Semite when he did a dozen cartoons taking down the Nazis during World War II, but he did one cartoon with a joke about Jewish caricatures, which, by the way, after its original release, and he got some negativity back from it, he edited that cartoon, and they reanimated that scene so that the big bad wolf disguised himself as a blind man instead of a Jew. And that's the version that got circulated for like 70 years afterward.
Right.
He recognized that this joke was offending people, and he actually made the measures to fix it, to edit it. He realized it was hurting people's feelings. This is not something that a simmering, seething anti-Semite would do.
Yeah.
But people kind of just ignore that, because they want to believe that this guy who made such family-friendly kids entertainment was in reality Adolf Hitler's protege, like the apt pupil kind of character, because that's just fun to believe for conspiracy theories. And the reality was he was just doing caricatures like he did for everybody at the time.
And there's more evidence.
I think another part where
sorry. No, I'm just going to say there's a lot more evidence than that. He did many wartime videos, and he was very helpful to the American government. He's happy to help against Nazis, and particularly against Germans. He also did a lot of things to help the American military. He did all kind of animated things for educational purposes, for training, and different things like this. He, as was said in the very beginning by Mark, the man was a patriot. He was a strong patriot, and he was very anti-Nazi in the things they did. It doesn't make any sense. There's no evidence. All the evidence is just as silly and stupid as a lot of stuff we see today. This is not at all what Walt Disney was, and it's easy to prove it. It's not hard. Just a little bit of research, and you'll find out that it's nonsense. And of course, the Family Guy, he likes to be trollish and edgelordy. It's what he is, it's just. It is what it is. Go ahead, Tim.
And I think it's one of those instances where when you repeat a lie enough times, it just ends up becoming the truth to a lot of people. I think a lot of it stems from probably the most vocal critic from, I don't want to say inner circle, but in his immediate sphere of influence, it's an animator named Art Babbitt, who really did not like Walt. And Art Babbitt was Jewish. But even Art Babbitt was on record as saying that he had never taunted me using anti-Semitic slurs or insults. But, whenever people see, Art Babbitt's Jewish, he didn't like Disney, Disney might have said something to him, ergo, he was anti-Semitic, just because he happened to be critical of someone Jewish and because that person was critical of him. In 1955, he actually won the Man of the Year award by B'nai B'rith chapter of the Jewish community in Beverly Hills.
That's right.
That's crazy. I mean, that was less than a decade before he died. So, I mean, if the man was anti-Semitic, you would think that to the end of his life that he would have been accused at the time, and yet he got the 1955 Man of the Year award from the Jewish community.
That's right. And keep in mind, Walt Disney was doing diversity hires decades before it became a subject of conversation. Decades. He was very much would hire people of all this ethnicity, particularly even black people, and he would give them jobs. They said nothing but praises about him. And this is another thing that comes up. We're talking about anti-Semitism. We also hear things about racism about Walt Disney, which is absolutely nonsense. And I do believe that's coming out of the Song of the South, which I don't even know if that was made when he was alive. Was it?
It was, and we can talk about that because
I love the Song of the South.
I saw Song of the South thanks to Mark. Mark may or may not have a bootleg copy of it that I may or may not have seen, but I was shocked. I would say after I saw it, even though I only saw it recently within the last 4 years, I easily rank it in one of the top 5 Disney movies of all time that I've seen. And one thing that I think will shock people, so for people listening in the chat who don't really know about it, a lot of people will say, well, it's racist because it's about slavery. No, it's not. It's about Reconstruction. It's about the post-slavery, post-Civil War life, and it actually portrays the black people as the heroes. They're the heroes of the tale. And people who say like, oh, well, it's racist and its depictions, yada, yada, yada. James Baskett, who played Uncle Remus, he had nothing but praise for Walt, saying that Walt actually fought to get him an Academy Award when at the time that was not fashionable. And yes, there was a downside to it, which is that I think, if I'm not mistaken, he actually couldn't accept the award because it was actually the awards were being held in a place where there was still segregation. So he was basically like across the street, and that's awful. It was the idea that he won a victory, that, you can't get the whole loaf of bread, but Walt helped him to get 3/4 of the way there. But Song of the South is amazing. If you have an opportunity to get a copy of it somehow, watch it. I think you'd be amazed how good it is. It was basically like Roger Rabbit before Roger Rabbit was cool. Which is ironic because Roger Rabbit is in and of itself kind of a meta-analysis on segregation in Hollywood. Like when you rewatch the movie as an adult, you're like, I think the cartoons are an analogy for like black people.
Well, so the suppression of Song of the South and the censorship of a great example of why suppression of the arts is dangerous, because if you ask people, most people haven't seen Song of the South because it's not readily available outside of bootlegs. But you ask them, like, what do you know about Song of the South? Like, oh, it's about slaves and it's full of racism. It's a bad movie. Like, well, have you seen it? and they
When I
say
saw it as
no.
a kid, I loved it, bro.
Yeah,
Like
me too.
exactly. So when you watch it now, exactly, and people know that song,
Beautiful
but
song.
they don't know the plot. And I mean, they watch the movie now, and it is the exact opposite of what it's recognized for in the popular culture as being a racist movie. It's actually about unity. So it's the old plantation lady who was a friend of Uncle Remus, who was raised by Uncle Remus. She gets worried that Uncle Remus's stories about Briar Rabbit are corrupting her grandson, you know, and so she tells her grandson and Uncle Remus they can't play together anymore. And so it's this story about, you know, a white kid and a black man being held apart and they can't be friends anymore. But at the end, when the young boy gets injured, they ask Uncle Remus in to his bedside to tell him a story about Briar Rabbit. And that gives the little boy the will to live again. And he comes back. And the whole point of the movie is that segregation is wrong and that black people and white people can be friends. It's a movie, it's an anti-racist message about unity and about coming together. But you wouldn't know that if you just listened to the reputation the movie has about being racist and full of slaves, which is untrue.
Do keep in mind that the people who are railing against that movie and balking against it are the same ones who put the Jim Crow laws in, the same ones who created the KKK, and the same ones that are railing against it today, Democrats. Yeah.
That's true.
Southern Democrats, to be specific. But to add that, I would like to do this quote from Disney legendary animator Floyd Norman, who is black. He said, the funny part was minorities weren't knocking at the gates to get in. The jobs were there if they wanted them and if they were qualified. It's like the old ruse that Walt didn't hire Jews, which is also ridiculous. There were plenty of Jews at Disney. Personally, I've never felt any ridicules from Walt.
Okay.
Now, and Floyd Norman was an incredible animator too.
Yeah, he was. He was. Let's take a little shift here. Now, of course, what we're doing here today is we're talking about Walt Disney is an American hero, and all the nonsense around him, which seems to get bigger and bigger all the time, oddly, is nonsense. And we've covered a lot of it already. But I want to come over and talk to someone else about it. Gary. Now, Gary is over here doing some nice little art here, which is awesome. Now, Gary, could you please give us your opinion on Walt Disney himself, please?
Well, I didn't know Walt. I did meet Floyd, actually. Had breakfast with Floyd. Rick and I had breakfast with Floyd. Rick knows Rick Law, that is. He knows Floyd very well. And there was a documentary that Rick helped with. You actually should have had him on here. But I didn't know Walt. I'm not that old. But my impression of Walt, or the things that I remember about my thoughts on him, I mean, was that he was a wonderful person. Like you said in your intro, like he was a family person. He did Disneyland as a place for the whole family. That's why it's not a lot of like super scary rides. I mean, it's something for the whole family. But yeah, I like Walt Disney.
Yeah.
So I'm more on the art side of things. I'm not a historian. So were you going to say something, Chester?
Oh, no, I was just going to add to the amusement park thing. When he built the amusement park, one of the reasons he wanted to do that was to change. He saw the amusement park could be something different. You have to keep in mind, and this is a lot of those things that have been mentioned here today, are things that are in context in the period. They were cultural at the time, right? And at that time, most of the amusement parks around America were actually kind of like the sideshow carnivals. There was shows and freak shows and a lot of alcohol and a lot of drunk people, and it had a very bad impression. It was not a place you took your kids. It was not a family place at all. But what happened was Walt went over and visited Copenhagen. Of course, Copenhagen has this absolutely beautiful little amusement park that is wonderful. It's for families. It's still today is beautiful, and he saw that it could be something different. So when he came back with his idea, and like I said in the beginning, him to create the amusement park, his stockholders, shareholders were not happy about the idea at all, and it took quite a bit for him to sell them on it. But his idea was to create something that was for family, not some drunken, crazy, nighttime activity. And he successfully did so, right? He made something for the family.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Chester, but like Mark and I, this sounds really weird, but it's true. But for almost a decade, Mark and I go to Disney World every year. Mark and I split all of our profit 50-50, and I actually put aside a little slush fund for him, so that our corporate vacation, I guess you could say, is going to Disney World. And that might be a topic on its own, because we have a lot of insight into kind of what's been going on, and how some things have improved, some things have declined, some things have stayed the same. But
what are the shady dealings of Disneyland? What's going on behind? What's going behind the back alleys of Disneyland, my dude?
Well,
or what's going on with like Galaxy's Edge? But
right.
In short, in short, if you know the history of the Disney parks as an adult, you have a greater appreciation of almost like what a modern masterpiece the whole setup is. Like, we take it for granted because we've had it with us since we were kids. But knowing that achievement compared to what you said, back then there were only two types of amusement parks. You had those seedy Coney Island type places where it was just kind of like known as being places of debauchery, or you had kind of like these kiddie parks where only children could enjoy it, but the parents couldn't. They were too busy sitting on park benches. He found a way of being able to skillfully integrate his entertainment with the park experience.
Yeah, no, very good point.
Right.
Now, Gary here actually has a very interesting little story with him and he and Rick actually regarding a very secret place at Disneyland. Why don't you go ahead and tell him about that, Gary?
I can't do that. That would be throwing Rick under the bus. It's really
Is it the best glory holes to get with Goofy?
It's talking about the 33 Club, dude.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Holy cow! That's crazy.
Now, Gary's actually been inside it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a rare treat that not many people
Club
have
33,
been privy to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've been there. I don't know what to say about it. It's just a restaurant. It has an elevator. It's very classy on the inside. You have to ring if you're over in like New Orleans area in Disneyland, it's located, there's like a door, and there's like a plaque, and there's a little, like a doorbell, like a circular doorbell, I believe. And you push it, and there's a little speaker there, and then they'll answer. And then I guess you say, I have a reservation or something. Some people, they would let us in just because we'd push the button and we'd talk to them. And so we, before, I mean, Rick's been in there because he was like, went with a group or something like that. I've only gotten in by messing with the people, like going, hey, yeah, let us in. We know all about it. Come on. And then they'd let us in and say, okay, there's nothing going on. And they'd let us in. And they give us like a tour or something like that. But yeah, it's I don't know that it's so much a secret club anymore. I think that you actually can kind of get in there if you're a member or something like that.
Yeah, if you pay $10,000 a year for just the basic fee.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. But Gary just scammed his way in. That's what I want to hear. I do have a few comments over here in the chat I want to catch up with. Mainly everyone's listening, which is really cool. Let's see. Nick W says the real TFT is Chester's love of Zoe Quinn, goddess mode. All right. Thank you, Nick. You're never going to let that go, are you? I can't be honest.
We definitely need to do a full in-depth review of that.
I call it as I see him, dude. John Diller says, Chester, I couldn't be on. I got stuck in Mexico, and I'm roaming, so watching the show is costing me a fortune. Sorry I couldn't be on, and sorry I couldn't stay and watch. No problem, John. Maybe next time. I don't know what you're doing in Mexico, but be careful, okay? But he is a Mexican, so he should be fine. He doesn't speak Mexican very well, though. I think it's a problem, but he'll be all right.
Oh, míos Dios.
We love John Diller request. Now I want to take another shift, and I do apologize for this one, but we got to do it. I'm going to shift over to George. Now George is the enemy today, and George is going to give us some negative opinions. So everyone, boo George from the beginning. Let's get it out of the way. All right, 3, 2, 1. Boo, boo, George.
We hate you.
All right, George, take it away, dude.
Until the end of the week.
I got your white box, dude, so go ahead and do your presentation.
All right, great, awesome. first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming on board. This is going to be a fun ride. Pun intended. All right. I'd like to address a few things regarding Walt Disney, the company, and the man, all at the same time. He developed the multiplane camera. This is the core elements of what makes animation great and special effects great. That's one of the many things that he developed, but he also developed future world, a forward-thinking environment where technology and creativity come together. This was also developed and pioneered by Disney. The theme park experience, another innovation by Disney. I don't have to go any further than just the title of it. Everybody knows that. The enclosed ride experience. It wasn't no longer a roller coaster and exposed to the environment. Trips like underneath a submarine, stationary trips where you sit in a chair and you're having 3D thrown at you in a screen. All this was developed by Disney. The television. Now this is what's going to blow a lot of people's mind. Disney saw the innovation of the television, even though it was in black and white. In 1954, ABC agreed to a weekly Disney series. The series debuted in 1954 and it was a major success, but it wasn't enough for Disney. So he wanted to move into color. So what he did a few years later is he moved his show to NBC, where the entire program was broadcast in color on a regular basis. It was the first full color regular broadcast in network. And it was called the Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. Okay, so this is important. He pushed color before it was even adapted by everybody else. Branding, products, toys. I don't have to go any further than that. And of course, the monorail. Yes, the monorail was developed by Disney, an innovation. Today, it's something of a standard thing in most cities, but it all started off at Disney. But there's also the dark side of Disney, the copyright. And while the corporation and the man could be said that it's one of the same, there's something interesting about the copyright that makes it possibly the world's greatest theft happening right before our eyes. And this is where I'm going to hold the rest of the presentation. December 20, 1812 was the day in Germany when the Grimm's Fairy Tales was released. It was also released in a popular oversized poster broadsides format, single-story formats of the more popular tales such as Hansel and Gretel. But the stories were often added to collections by other authors without respect to the copyright, as the tales became a focus of interest for children book illustrators. Well, here's something very interesting. As the copyright of the Grimm's fairy tale would proceed further and further into the years, at the death of the brothers Grimm, the copyright went to Herman Grimm, Wilhelm's son, one of the Grimm brothers' son, who continued to practice of printing the volumes in expensive and complete editions. However, the copyright lapsed after 1893, and various publishers began to print the stories in many formats and editions. In the 21st century, the Grimm's fairy tale in English is the universally recognized text. Well, here's something interesting regarding the public domain. Regarding this, the Grimm fairy tales is paramount regarding the copyright, the public domain, and what's going on in our works that we have. The public domain of the future cannot be protected without constraints on prospective copyright duration. Copyright was for 14 years when it originally started, but today the copyright terms have been regularly extended, quietly, conveniently, to ensure that the works of the Disney Corporation would never enter to the public domain, and also keeping out thousands of other works. Current copyright law is life of the author plus 70 years. But this is only part of the situation, as copyright has been continually expanded to ensure that new works wouldn't enter the public domain, what some have called the perpetual copyright of the installment plan. Essentially, while Disney's empire was created in large part from the public domain, it has ensured that other future competitors would not reuse their material. One of the greatest thefts in history, perhaps. While Disney took and reused from the public domain, none of the works created by Disney, including derivative works based upon public domain works, has entered the public domain for others to build upon. If current policy is extend, then they will never will. The content industry has argued that their copyright is their natural right property, something that the USA founders never agreed with, and the Constitution makes clear is not the case. Under the content industry's logic, they have argued that reusing others' work without paying them is always stealing, and they have pushed for more and more restrictions upon doctrines like fair use. One of the content industry's most I hate this word, but I'll just skip it over. What's the word? Sorry. Vocal supporters in Congress. Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, Republican, has even directly ridiculed the concept of fair use as being theft by comparing it to being a little bit pregnant, arguing, how do you go snip just a little bit of what somebody else has created? We have to begin to look at this issue, not as just snippets, but we have to look at it as theft. The first Mickey Mouse film, Steamboat Willie, was itself a parody of Buster Keaton film, Steamboat Bill Jr., parody and being a form of fair use. If in the vernacular of the content history, taking other people's work without paying for it is always stealing, then the Disney Corporation is responsible for one of the greatest thefts in world history. Now, I'd just like to give you three statements after this. A trademark identifies the company or type of product to the consumer. A copyright protects the plot, the substance, the dialogue, the notes, etc. of a particular piece of film, story, music, video game, etc. A patent identifies a unique mechanism, such as an innovation. Now, this chart that I've held in front of everybody that's white boxed is very key. This is what's going on right now, and this is where the theft is going on. While Disney is working diligently behind the scenes, doing payoffs here, donations there, just greasing the wheels of the American system, they are extending the copyright so that way it will never fall into the public domain. But the fallout, the unintended consequences of this is that while they're trying diligently to protect their copyright, they are also preventing works created by others to not fall into the public domain. Because every time Disney goes back to Congress, to the legal system, to grease the wheels and to extend the copyright, they're also preventing copyrights from other authors being prevented to become into the public domain. And you say, well, this is a good thing. Well, no, it's not, because it was copyright was only intended to allow authors monetary substance during their lifetime plus 14 years. Well, during their lifetime plus 70 years is a little ridiculous. Why? Because such wonderful works will never actually be available in the school system, where children will learn from new works, not just repeated standard works like Shakespeare and whatnot, but new works that the children can learn from. All these new works will actually bleed the system monetarily, and there is no monetary value after the author has passed away, except for, of course, the corporation. What you're seeing here is the different shades of colors. The 1790 Act, life plus 14 years, and which also goes all the way to the Sonny Bono Act, which is life plus 70 years. So now, theoretically, by 2023, the first works of Disney should start to be falling into the public domain. Mm-hmm. Now, I speculate that somewhere the wheels are being greased, because we're closing in on 2020, and it takes time to grease the wheels in the American system. And by the time 2023 comes up, we will discover that there's going to be a new extension to the copyright. Now, how do you take this, ladies and gentlemen of this forum? And I'm talking about future listeners. Do you think copyright's a good thing, a perpetual copyright?
So Mark and I have actually talked about this for quite a while, and I think Mark and I have actually two different opinions.
Excellent.
On it. Are you still there, Mark?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so excellent. I actually agree. I actually
my presentation.
Thank you, George.
Oh dear.
Well, what'd you say, George? I didn't.
Yeah, see, he said, and that concludes my presentation. Yeah.
Okay. I think Mark and I will play two sides of it. I actually support more stringent copyright laws past the death of the owner, and part of that is because as an incorporated entity myself, I want to make sure that my IP is protected for not only the people taking over for me, whether that be my children or whoever, or Mark's offspring, whoever they might be. I want to make sure that it stays in good hands. So I actually am for the extension of copyright and trademark protection, whereas I think Mark feels more that things should go into the public domain, and that characters created should eventually, in essence, become public entities simply because of their prevalence in pop culture.
I do, and it's a matter of the laws we had before, whether it was like 30 years or 40 years or 50 years after the creator's death. I feel that was reasonable, and this nonstop extension, which are colloquially called Mickey Mouse laws, which are done through lobbying, like George said, I feel those are unethical and that they aren't helpful. They aren't being done in good faith. They're just being done so that a corporation can maintain a hold on something Walt Disney created, almost a century ago. And what public domain does, public domain is beneficial, and as George said, in that it grows what can be offered to people to use for research and to use for development. Like, most of Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain, and so those stories by Arthur Conan Doyle are freely available for anybody to read whenever they want them without having to get past a paywall. And so more people can appreciate and learn from Conan Doyle's writing without having to pay up for it. Likewise, with a lot of the earliest films, the silent era films, like Phantom of the Opera and stuff, people can watch those and they can learn from those. But if we have this never-ending copyright extension, then no one can learn from those things and no one can build upon them. It isn't just about making really crappy direct-to-video Dracula sequels just because you can without having to pay a licensing fee. So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., all of his speeches are actually copywritten, and his estate holds them behind a paywall. If any academic institution wants transcripts of his speeches, or recordings of his speeches to use in an academic environment to teach people, they have to pay a licensing fee to the estate of Martin Luther King Jr., to basically to his kids. And so is that what Dr. King wanted? Did he want his kids to just get rich while keeping his words and his influences behind a paywall? I don't think so. Obviously, we can't ask him, but that's essentially what happens. These things were meant to bring income into the estate or the company that created them, Walt Disney in this discussion, but were they meant to be held away from the public for all eternity, which is what these copyright and lobbying extensions have resulted in? And I don't think so. I think that 60 years after the creator's dead, the creator doesn't care anymore. The creator is gone. If someone is perverting or doing fair use parodies or versions of his characters, it's not really a matter anymore. The original text is still out there. The original Frank Baum Wizard of Oz is still out there for people to read, even if there's a million crappy sequels and spin-offs that other people have done. And if anybody wants the unmolested original text, they can find it, and they can see the purest form of that story. And they'll know which versions are the crappy sequels done and fan fiction essentially done by people 100 years later.
Sure.
But we'll never have that again.
I think George made a very important distinction, which I will agree with him with, which is there must be a distinction between Walt Disney the man and Disney the corporation. Disney the man he's very easy to defend. I have a lot easier time doing that than I do Disney the corporation, which I have a lot of grievances with. So I'm sure that distinction is
especially in
aware.
this day and era. How much of the media do they own at this point? I mean, like
a lot,
like movies, television, just bloody everything, right? Like,
It's like
it's ridiculous how much
65%.
It's ridiculous how much entertainment they own today.
Yeah. Well, let me throw a wrench into the works here. First thing I do want to mention here, Curious 2A says, that's even funnier when you realize MLK didn't write his speeches. But of course, don't misunderstand what George was saying, because if you want to go and create your own Snow White based on Grimm fairy tales, you most certainly can do that. You just can't do what Disney did. Just to make that distinction very clear.
You can't use their trademarks. Is what it comes down to.
Well, actually, I got a hold on, George. I got a question for Dr. Wright. I'd like him to respond first, if he wouldn't mind. But here's my monkey wrench. What if, in the past few years, we've seen Disney become extremely woke? I mean, they have become very, very, very left-wing very quickly. Now, what are the politics? We know under Walt's time they were certainly conservative, and they became more moderate for sure. But we've seen them become extremely lefty. Now, I'm kind of curious. Do you think this might have something to do with the fact that we are just about to come up on the end of the time where Disney is protected, Mickey Mouse is protected, and they are greasing the right wheels in politics to make sure that they can extend that further? What do you think, Dr. Wright?
I mean, it's a possibility. Like, I don't know. They basically made their living on the public domain. I mean, they created all those different, like, Peter Pan and everything, and then they did get some rights, like Mary Poppins. They got that one legitimately, but I mean, even like the lady hated them.
Well, she hated the concept of commercialism, not him particularly.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with what Pellegrini and everybody saying was like, and George, and that the original way this was created, the whole system was to basically lasted the life of that, the creator, and then they're just making it so that they get to keep it indefinitely, and that is just by trademark though. The only way they can really keep it is by locking down the trademark attached to it. It's almost like a recipe.
Yeah.
And they attach the trademarks to those ideas. Now, as far as them being woke and everything, I think it's just a response to what's going on. Because somehow like all entertainment seems to have been injected with these like far leftist weirdos that are only 8% of the world, but seem to be, seem to comprise all of our entertainment for some reason.
Yeah, well, I was just saying, is there a political motivation behind it in contact with the copyright law? But do keep in mind, we see this all the time, right? Like, for instance, a lot of people say, why doesn't Mary Jane have red hair? Why isn't she a redhead?
Yeah.
Now, we know there's a whole nother thing going on against redheads. That's
Ginger
obviously
genocide.
the ginger genocide. But
That's right.
actually, the reason why Sony's doing that has nothing to do with it. The reason they're doing that is because if they use a redheaded Mary Jane in this movie that is currently attached under contract to Disney, then Disney can turn around and use that product themselves. That's why they changed her, and that's why they changed many things, was to make sure that if they want to use the redheaded Mary Jane later, they can do it themselves. It's all about copyright. It's all about control. It's not what you think. A lot of people think, oh, they're just getting all woke and broken. We know Sony does that, but in this particular case, it's exactly what we're talking about. It's exactly this situation. It's about controlling the copyright.
No, it's true. A lot of it is branding. A lot of these changes that movie and TV adaptations do, some of them may be, ideological. I mean, the whole ginger genocide thing, that is such a huge trend. It's hard to ignore. But just looking past that and into design changes. So, I mean, a totally different example is the 1998 version of Godzilla done by TriStar, where Godzilla was that weird iguana-looking thing.
Yeah.
The Roland Emmerich movie. They did that on purpose so that people would recognize their Godzilla from all the other versions of Godzilla. So that when people went to the store to buy a Godzilla toy or a Godzilla beach towel or a Godzilla t-shirt, they bought their version of Godzilla, in which they would get the royalties in the back end from, and not some other version of Godzilla, the Toho Godzilla, the classic one, in which they did not get the royalties from. It's why Sonic the Hedgehog and that awful Sonic the Hedgehog trailer that came out looked so weird and so bad, is because they wanted people to see that, no, this is our Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah,
go out
marketing.
and buy the Sonic the Hedgehog movie stuff. Don't go out and buy the other classic Sonic stuff, which you won't get, and which we won't get profits from. And so there is a reason. Sony wants their Mary Jane or MJ or whatever they're calling it, the Zendaya version, to be immediately associated with those movies, so that if anybody goes out to buy a MJ doll or an MJ whatever, they buy the Zendaya version and not the version where only Marvel gets to reap the royalties from. So
That's right.
It all comes down to money.
Yeah, it always does.
That's the same thing like Beauty and the Beast. I have a film lit professor friend, and she loves Beauty and the Beast. And I think it was Jean Cocteau or something like 1925 or something created the first Beauty and the Beast films, and it was a brilliant film. It's actually really good. It even holds up today, even though it's black and white and kind of slow. But it's more about her growth as a woman than the Beast. Whereas they make it more about the Beast because they wanted to sell the furry and the prince and the princess and all that other kind of crap. And so, I mean, they've always been more about well, no, I don't know if always, but as of recently, they've been more about marketing than actual good products. And especially now with the live movies and all that junk, I mean, they're
doing very poorly with those though. But we kind of gotten away from Walt, but that's all right. I knew we would. I would like Booster. Could you please read the Willie Mammoth's comment here in the chat? The art of read, please.
Chester Busby. The reason that they made the Frozen movie was to hide the Google search Disney and Frozen. Walt Disney is frozen under Disney World.
Now, this is a conspiracy theory about Walt Disney. Now, we know it's been persisting for a very long time.
I believe this 100%.
It's not true at all. The man was cremated.
I've actually never heard that.
Yeah, no.
Guaranteed. This is why that movie was made. That's the only reason it was successful. That's the only reason I could explain away why that mediocre piece of crap saw the day of light.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation.
And was hyped up as much as it was. Oh my God, that Let It Go song is the worst kind of earworm. I want to kill myself after hearing it.
Hold on a second. Let me dissect that a little bit before you get too far.
No, that was factual. You can't dissect that at all.
I can. First of all, he's not frozen. He is cremated. You can go to actually visit his funeral, his mausoleum, I believe.
Whose ashes are
That's
they?
what they want you to think. All
Whose
right, well,
ashes are they?
hold on a second. Of course, they say he's frozen, either himself or his head, under the Pirates of the Caribbean area in the Magic Kingdom. Okay, but the frozen thing is very interesting unto itself. Did they do that because every time you search Walt Disney, you also and the word frozen that came up, and they wanted to stop that search on the internet, which they did successfully, by the way. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's why they call it frozen.
No,
But
no.
hold
All
on,
you have
let
to
me
do is say
finish.
Walt Disney Frozen now, and you
Let
still get it.
Oh, okay. Well, let me finish, Booster. Hold on a second.
That's all I wanted to say. But
Okay.
now I'm going to say more things to piss you off.
All right, I'm going to kick you across the ocean, sir. No, that song. Now that movie was quite mediocre. My family, we noticed it because we had seen the year before the movie Tangled, which we really liked. We watched it as a family. It was a really good, fun movie. And the Frozen one wasn't very good, but everyone was going crazy over it. And I thought it was very interesting. And another point, a musical point, that song "Let It Go" is actually based upon a very standard melody that you can find in many, many, many songs. It keeps getting used over and over and over and over again. And the reason why they keep using this same melodic A minor, I think it's A minor. I have to go back and check. But the reason they keep using the same melody is because it's catchy. It catches people. But if you do a little bit of research, you'll find out that "Let It Go" song is actually like the 50th time it's been used. It's just continuous.
DuckTales, woohoo!
What have you, right?
Yeah.
It is interesting. A little thing about the frozen head about of Walt Disney. Anybody want to expound upon that?
Yeah, I
No.
will.
Oh, go ahead. I have another thing I was going to talk about.
Okay. The reason why that rumor came about is because during one of the interviews for the Orlando Disney World, Walt Disney actually joked that he wanted his head to be cryogenically frozen and put in the park, and that's where that rumor originated. But he didn't. He never made that. It was a complete joke. It was never in his wills. And he died of lung cancer, before he even could put that in there. But it came out of a joke during an interview, and everybody, the imagination of Disney always, watching, his patrons and everything, kind of like bred that idea of the cryogenically frozen head.
All right.
So, okay, since we're talking about conspiracy theories, here's one that I don't think anyone's heard yet. I may be wrong. I only heard this 2 weeks ago, but I just figured given tonight. Mark, I don't even think you've heard this yet. Okay.
Oh boy.
So here's how it goes. You can all imagine the Walt Disney logo, right? Like everyone knows what it looks like. It's like the castle and then the Tinkerbell arc over it. Have you heard how it pertains to the flat Earth theory?
Oh God. No.
Oh, do go on.
So I'll help you guys connect the dots. During Operation Paperclip, where the U.S. government actually got ex-Nazi scientists, who was the one who actually helped Walt Disney? Do you remember? Do you remember which one he paperclipped into helping him film documentaries and stuff?
I'm not sure. I know he did a lot of work with NASA.
Mengele, right?
No, it wasn't Mengele. It was Werner von Braun. Okay, so the guy who helped construct the V2 rocket was Werner von Braun, and he made it here to the U.S. He actually did some work for the Disney Corporation, and he was a rocket scientist. Now, when Werner von Braun died, his tombstone, his epitaph, is actually Psalm 19:1, which is, quote, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." So the flat Earth theorists say that Disney, in talking to von Braun, knew that the Earth was flat, and because he was given a gag order by Hollywood to get the truth out, he hid it in the logo for the Disney Corporation. That's not Tinkerbell's ark. That is the firmament, the dome of the firmament, keeping the floodwaters of heaven from raining upon the kingdom.
Wow.
Tim, are you having a stroke?
Well, he's
no, I heard this 2 weeks ago, and I just thought I have never heard that.
Well, it's also showing the tower coming through the dome, meaning that's representing the Tower of Babel. They're saying here. That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, we also know that with the Disney logo, you have the 666 in there as well. That's been brought up many times. Interesting.
Yeah, so if you
You
just
mean
Google...
it doesn't say Jiznip?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so if you just
Whatever.
Google Disney Flat Earth Werner von Braun, you'll see you'll go down that rabbit hole. No pun intended.
Yeah, and that D definitely looks like a backwards G. I like saying Walt Disney. I like the idea of that.
You guys.
Here's
that's
another
our theme park.
Well, here's another myth busted, which is the signature that we see now. That's not really Walt Disney's signature. That's a stylized signature that was created about 10 or 20 years after his death. So in the 80s, late 80s, that signature came from. It's just a stylized version of it. But if you look at Walt Disney's actual signature, it looks almost nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
Could it be that he had two different signatures?
No, it's completely made up.
Yeah,
it's a fake signature.
And of course, when these guys are digging at because we know there's some weird things that have happened at Disney, sure, but when we look at this, you're really grasping here for that to be 666. I mean, you really are. But a lot of conspiracy theories are grasping, and that's the fun of it. But this is. Oof, goodness gracious. Here's some more actually, looking at the way they have this. This is kind of interesting here.
How do we know you're not just defending Satanist Chester C. Busby the third? Free. Times 2 is 666.
Okay, Booster, you caught me. But the Mickey head that has the little curlicule things, that actually looks more 666y than the actual name. But it's a conspiracy theory, man. That's what we're talking about. So but anyway, let me come back over here to the panel. Let's see here. So now Gary has been sitting here arting the whole time, and of course we have Mickey and Donald Duck. Now, something that Mark had said in the very beginning, I think, is interesting because when we were back talking about Disney helping with the war effort by creating propaganda and stuff like that against the Japanese and the German Nazis, and he says that the Mickey Mouse became kind of a symbol of that, a representation of that. I get your point, but I actually always saw Donald Duck as that because a lot of the propaganda stuff has Donald Duck because he's a Navy man, he's a military person, and a lot of times they had Donald Duck doing stuff, helping, especially the military training stuff they had a lot of Donald Duck in it. So for me,
I have the Disney on the Walt Disney Treasures on the front line set. And so Mickey was deliberately kind of kept out of all those wartime cartoons because he was the company mascot. And so once he became the company mascot in the color era, he kind of had to stop having opinions. He just sort of became a logo. And so most of the wartime cartoons were Donald Duck ones, and it actually has an interesting arc where he goes to boot camp and Pete is his drill instructor and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually read the Floyd Gottfredson comics, they've been collected recently by Fantagraphics Books and some really nice hardcovers. But I was reading through those, and I got to the World War II era. In the newspaper comic, Mickey was all like, fuck you, Krauts. And he just went straight into just like punching the crap out of Nazis. And so in the newspaper comics, which people saw and read every single day, in their own homes, Mickey was just going and just trashing Nazis. But in the cartoons, which got, I guess, a bit more coverage and a bit more media, Mickey stayed out of it in those.
Yeah, that is true. And ding, by the way.
Yes. You owe us for a swear jar, buddy.
Yeah, swear jar.
That'll be $22.
No, $22,000. What are you talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we under the FCC rules in this stream?
We are. We're under the Dinale Llama rules, is what we're under.
Okay, all right. I'll go align my chakras.
But ding. We'll talk the specific afterwards. But one interesting fact about it is that the personality of Donald has changed over time, and specifically talking about Donald, the character when he went before the World War II thing, shorts and comic strips and everything, and post World War II, because one of the things that they rumor, or I don't know if you guys have heard about it as well, Tim, Mark, was that Donald Duck is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because of his time in the war, and that's why he acts nervous and reacts like he angrily and has those flash moods and everything. It's kind of crazy.
There was, I think, it might have been a Karl Barks one or one of his peers. It was like a one-page strip where Huey, Dewey, and Louie set off some firecrackers outside the window while Donald's sleeping, and he immediately wakes up and goes, "Ah, it's a Japanese attack!" And he grabs his gun and he starts like shooting all over the place because he basically just goes into
puts
shell
his helmet
shock.
on first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's another conspiracy theory. I don't know if they're talking about it as a conspiracy theory, but they're saying what is Goofy. But here's another conspiracy theory about Walt. He hated Goofy with a passion. He thought it was stupid and useless, and the only reason he kept it on was because his daughters liked it. You think that's true?
I love Goofy. Maybe, but the Goofy shorts hold up so much better than nearly any of the other contemporary shorts. They're so much funnier because they're done in like a Tex Avery style.
Yeah.
So they're faster and they're maybe cruder, but they're hilarious and they're actually the best ones to rewatch. So, maybe Walt can be wrong. He was a human being. Maybe he thought that they were uncouth and beneath what Disney was capable of, but they're still the funniest shorts he ever did.
I think he didn't like Goofy because they had already presented a dog as a dog Pluto. So it wouldn't, in his mind, it's like, it doesn't make sense if you have a dog talking, why doesn't Pluto talk as well?
Well, the reason
that was his main beef.
The reason I brought it up as a conspiracy theory is because there is opposing opinion that says, oh, no, Walt had no trouble with Goofy at all. There is an opposing opinions is why it's a conspiracy theory. And the reason they said that he didn't like it was because he felt that it had no point. It was too chaotic, and because for him, he wanted with his tunes with Mickey and Donald and all that stuff. He wanted to tell a story. He wanted to make a point, and he feels that Goofy doesn't make any point. Kind of like Tex Avery, it's just some goofy, fun hijinks. And he was standing against that. But I mean, the point is, we don't know what the truth is, because there are opposing opinions on what he felt about Goofy.
Maybe he didn't feel that Goofy. He was always innovating, and he always wanted to take animation to another step and to a next level. And maybe he felt that Goofy just wasn't improving the art form any. I mean, he was doing Goofy cartoons at the same time he was doing movies like Fantasia and Bambi, and he's like, well, I'm doing Fantasia and Bambi, and these guys over here are doing Goofy and his how to drive a car and how to ride a horse cartoons, like that's that was probably viewed by him as like a step back, or just not what Disney was capable of, wasn't innovating. I mean, I'm just putting words out there. I have no idea what he felt.
Well,
but that was the kind of person he was. He hated he hated the xerography era of animation, which is what came after Sleeping Beauty. 101 Dalmatians, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Jungle Book, Sword in the Stone. Those are the ones, if you when you see them, you know them because they have the sketchy outlines, because they fired their inking department for costs, and they took the pencils, put them through a Xerox machine, and Xerox them directly onto the cells without inking, and that's why everything looks really sketchy and scratchy. And he hated those because he had to do them as a cost-effective measure, and he saw that as sliding backwards in quality, and so he never liked a single one of those xerography cartoons, and then he died.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that.
That's the kind of guy he was,
Well, that's
good.
He
hated Sword in the Stone. He hated 101 Dalmatians. He had nothing nice to say about them. And Jungle Book was the last one he directly worked on before he died. But it was just, and they're great movies. I actually like the xerography era because you can see the pencil work directly from the animators.
Yeah.
You can even see their construction lines. It's sloppy maybe, but it gives you a better insight into what the artists were doing. But, after Sleeping Beauty and its super techno-rama, as he called it, art style, he viewed xerography as like, oh, we're falling behind. We're not doing it in the same quality we used to. We can't beat Sleeping Beauty. And so it was always kind of a disappointment to him.
Well, Joe here has a very interesting comment in the chat. He says, Goofy, Pluto, genetics, island of Dr. Moreau. Maybe, dude. Maybe. But I actually have a question. You guys seem to be quite knowledgeable about this. Did they ever do any kind of xeroscoping at Disney? They ever have any xeroscoping films? Not Xerox, xeroscoping. We know where they take live action and they each sell the
Rotoscoping.
Rotoscoping.
Rotoscoping. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Dinale.
Yeah, they have.
Actually, oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead, Gary.
Well, like even like Sleeping Beauty, where she's dancing with the prince. That was that. Well, they would use real people, real actors. They'd film it, and then they'd look at the film. But rotoscoping might be the wrong term. I'm not sure if they full on traced, which I think is what rotoscoping is. It's like they're just full on tracing. So it's similar to it. Like they would see the way the body would move, and they'd watch it in film, so they can see that each frame that goes by, you can see how the body moves, how hair would move, things like that, how a character would spin. But I don't think it was actual like tracing.
Yeah. They so like you said, they didn't do rotoscoping, which is what like Fleischer was famous for, and in the 60s and 70s, Ralph Bakshi became really famous for doing just nothing but rotoscope movies like Lord of the Rings, and yeah. So rotoscoping it's like what Gary said. It's when you film something in live action, and then you basically put the cells over it frame by frame and trace it. And so that's why you end up with that kind of uncanny valley frame rate, where when you see rotoscoping animation, you know it when you see it. Like those stock animations from He-Man, where he's like running towards the camera, and it's almost too detailed. You can just tell that something's off.
I have what 3 Disney words for you. 3 words. Thundar the Barbarian, baby.
Yes.
Yes.
But what Disney did was because rotoscoping is old. Fleischer did it as far back as Coco the Clown in the silent films.
Sure.
I love his Superman shorts.
Those are amazing.
Beautiful.
And they did use them in those, but what Disney understood was that you end up with that uncanny valley look, and it's almost like cheating. It's like using mocap in CG animation, where like those movies like Mars Needs Moms, or
Polar Express. Those movies are
Jim
so
Carrey.
ugly.
That just look. They're ugly and they're almost scary looking. But rotoscope is like the traditional animation version of that. And Disney understood that it looks weird and it looks bad, so they would film reference footage for all the more detailed actions that their characters would do. And like Gary said, the animators would look at the footage frame by frame, but they wouldn't trace it. They would just have the frames next to their drawing board. They would look at the frame, draw their version of what they were seeing on the frame, and then move along. And that's how you ended up with a more animated looking version of it without technically being rotoscoped. And that was one of the things that obviously it wasn't as easy as rotoscoping, and it cost more, but it created, some very distinct animations. Like the actress who played Tinker.
And boom, Mike just went out.
Whoa,
he was having trouble.
The mouse is onto us.
Oh no.
Well, he was going to say the actress.
You think you talk crap about me?
Oh goodness, Booster! I do see Nick W does have a quick little comment here. I have to read this. Mark makes a good point until I realize his avatar is from Rock and Roll Nightmare. Lol. Go ahead, Dinale.
I was going to say Mark was going to go with. You could see that with the actress who played Tinkerbell, with the Peter Pan animation, that they actually filmed her movement and her actions, and then they referenced her in the animation exactly to bring those lifelike details, quality that we remember. When we remember Tinkerbell, we remember her pixie-like dancing. So because they saw the actual actress dance, and reference those films. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just want to make a fun fact that of course Walt Disney had a lifelong obsession and love with Peter Pan, and one of the little interesting points people might not know is that when he was a kid, he actually played Peter Pan in a school play, and his brother actually was the one pulling on the rope to make him fly.
Hey, Mark is back. Mark, did you hear that comment about Rock and Roll Nightmare?
He's not talking to us. He's had enough of this. He's had enough of us.
Mike died.
Rip Mark.
it's the Roger Heller says, I love the animation technique they used when they came out with the animated Tarzan movie. Oh yeah, that what do they call that? Anybody know? That style. That was a great movie. It was beautiful, very fluid.
That's called 2D animation mixed with 3D animation. But the actual Tarzan himself was 2D animation. Most of the backgrounds, I think, were done in 3D animation. So they kind of merged the two together. And I think Glenn Keane was the head of that, like the head animator on that.
Yeah.
He did Tarzan, actually. And Glenn Keane is also known for Tangled. He was the guy who did Tangled, the main animator guy.
Oh, that was a beautiful film. Another film that was really good, and I'm pretty sure this is Disney. You guys correct me if I'm wrong, but Treasure Planet. Now, Treasure Planet didn't do
I think
particularly.
that's underrated.
It's extremely underrated. It didn't do very well, but it's one of the most beautiful animated films I've ever seen. It's stunningly good. Yeah. But that was Disney, right?
Yeah, that's Disney. Yep. Treasure Planet also was a mixture of 2D and 3D animation. And for some reason, I think it may have been the very last 2D animation that was used in like a major motion picture.
It was.
Like that. They jumped over to all 3D animation, which I feel like is they're doing. The 3D stuff looks really good, but I still feel like 2D animation should still be around. I feel like they should be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got textures.
Well, the Princess and the Frog is a 3D animation done in a 2D style, but they all jumped at that time because of a certain company called Pixar show what they could do with the force of computer graphics and 3D animations. At the way you can even look at Beauty and the Beast and Ariel. There's if there's frames there that you can see that they're experimenting with the 3D in the backgrounds environment. For Beauty and the Beast, I can distinctly remember the whole dance and the way that the camera moves down and you see the chandelier. That's all 3D animation right there, focusing on the 2D animation, which is the two characters right there.
Yeah. And it is unfortunate, I think, that Disney and once again, rest in pepperoni's Mark. He certainly died. But one of the unfortunate things I'd say about the live action adaptations they're doing, first of all, they're doing horribly. They're not doing well at all. And second of all, I think they're kind of missing the point. These are wonderful animated classics that we all grew up on and we all love. Why would you want to, excuse my language, but bastardize them by bringing them into this weird live action stuff that they're not doing well at all? I don't understand why they keep pushing them.
I can answer that, because what we just talked about earlier, what you even mentioned, Chester, it's retaining the rights to those stories and properties. It's no longer an animated copyright, it's now a live action copyright.
You think it's as simple as that?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, the thing that's sort of ironic about it is that it isn't live action. It's still animated. All of that, all those animals and things that they're doing, like Jungle Book, I guess Mowgli and some of the human characters were all live action, but the rest of it was all CG.
That's right.
And then now with Lion King, that's all CG, I think. I don't know that there's anything in it that's
no, you're right.
There's one scene
in Lion,
go ahead.
In Lion King.
Yeah.
The opening shot of the sunrise. The other thing Disney has granted the copyright license, the copyright to Snow White. Now, get this: Snow White is in the public domain, but they have been granted the copyright to Snow White, but it has to be associated to their visual representation of Snow White.
Sure.
Which is why Snow White and the Huntsman is not represented just Snow White. They always put "and the Huntsman" in the title, so it's never Snow White by itself. And the visual distinction between Snow White and the Huntsman and Snow White Disney is very, very different. So if you want to actually challenge Disney, you create Snow White and the incredible tree monster, and make sure that your Snow White does not look like Disney's, and you'll have a problem.
That's pretty standard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's normal.
It is, but this is the very first time a public domain character title has been granted back into copyright.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I mean, they did a Mowgli, which I think was, what was that, Warner Brothers, and that just came out right after Jungle Book, and it's almost like it's the same movie, but I mean, you know, obviously it's different, but you know, so they are doing it. I think what it is that Disney, when Disney creates their version of like a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale or whatever it is, they do it in such a stylized way that if somebody wanted to go and do, like, say, The Little Mermaid, if you read The Little Mermaid, they've tweaked it so much, changed the ending and Disneyized it so much that now that's what you think The Little Mermaid is. But the original source material from Hans Christian Andersen, if you were to read that, it has a totally different tone and feeling to it. It isn't a Disney product.
Sure. That's true.
Disney did do something to it. They changed it and made it their own.
Well,
but
you know,
now for some, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I just wanted to add into it. You do realize that Disney's live action of The Little Mermaid, they're Disneyfying the out of it because Ariel is now black. Did you know that?
I heard something, but even if they did, I mean, even if Disney was to go in and say, let's do Little Mermaid again, which I guess they're doing, and they totally changed it completely, go away from what they did originally with Little Mermaid and stylize it in another way, then it becomes another version of a Disney thing. You know what I mean? It still isn't going, and then if somebody wanted to, like Warner Brothers or anybody wanted to go and do a Little Mermaid story, they might have to change the title. It wouldn't be called The Little Mermaid anymore, but they could do some story, not copy the style of Disney, and they could do it.
Sure.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
so it goes back to control of the copyrights.
It does. Now Mark's back, but can Mark speak? Mr. Rock and Roll Nightmare. I guess not. It sounds like his.
So he told me what happened. So he said apparently, as he was talking about Tinkerbell, his cat ran across and tore his jack out.
Oh wow! Blame it on the cat. All right. Cool.
That's what he's doing. He's blaming the cat.
He is blaming the cat. At least he's not blaming the rabbit. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
But you never blame the rabbit.
You never blame the rabbit, yeah. All right, guys. Well, we've been hacking at this for an hour and 40 minutes. We've had a great conversation, actually, about Walt Disney and Disney as well. We knew it was going to leak into that, and that's just fine. But I think it was really good. The intention here was today was to come in and point out that Walt Disney is an American hero, and I think that we have successfully done that. He was a great man who did a lot of things for a lot of people. He helped a lot of people. He was a person who fought for equal rights for people, diversity, what have you, long before that was stylish, decades before. He was a true human being that wanted to help people. He tried to pay his employees as much as he possibly could, and he changed the world, not only in the innovation of all the amazing things he did, but just in the actual warm, wonderful magic that is Disney. And I think it's very important to try to remember what the man was trying to create, because today we see Disney has been appropriated by some pretty hateful business people. Now, it's not everybody. There's plenty of great people who work at Disney, both inside the animation studios as well as at the parks, of course. But there is a certain cartel of individuals at Disney who do not have good intentions. And this is quite obvious. And I think it's important for us to remember where Disney is coming from and the man who created it. And hopefully, cross our fingers and be optimistic that maybe one day Disney will be able to get back to the type of intention and inception that Walt Disney himself wanted. Anybody have any comments they'd like to make?
I think I have the perfect way to end the stream.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone should leave off their best Donald Duck impression.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not doing that.
Well, go ahead.
I can't even do it. I wish Mark's headset was working. He actually does a pretty good one.
Yeah, you actually can.
Yeah.
Let's sing the Mickey Mouse
That's
song.
rare.
Well, I think with, whoops, sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, well, I think that when it comes to what is being produced now at Disney, if they want to follow a certain agenda, they're fully welcome to do that. And it basically is going to come down to, when are people going to stop giving their money to something that they don't like?
Right.
It's just like the Star Wars franchise, the things that were done with that. If people really are that much up in arms about it, then stop watching them.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not going to go watch a movie that I don't like. I mean, I'm not talking about Star Wars. I'm talking about just any movie. If somebody puts a movie out randomly, if the movie's good, I'll go see it. I mean, if it entices me, like with the trailer and things like that, I'll go see it. If it isn't, if it looks like it's garbage, then why would I want to go and see it? So Disney is in the business of making money with their properties. And if they've shift gears lately, and they're trying to promote a certain agenda or something like that, it's only going to be a matter of time, if the masses don't like it, that they will hit the brakes and stop buying tickets, you know what I mean, or whatever it is. That's what I think. I mean, if I don't like something, I don't see it.
Yeah, and we've been covering that for quite a while here, Gary. They are losing money. The parks are going down.
Part.
Everything's going down. It is curious to see how long. And that's why I threw that question in about is there some politics behind it revolving around the copyright? I don't know if that's true. It's just a question. But I agree 100%, Gary. Yeah. Any other closing comments here from anybody?
I think that's a conversation for another time. Like, that's a whole other topic, is the corporate culture.
Yeah.
Behind the current corporation. And I think one thing that people need to look at, well, this all ties everything kind of together. One is, people probably don't want to admit it, but Walt Disney was a Republican.
He was, yeah.
So he did have some pretty conservative values. The other thing too is that if you look at the history of his inner circle, his 9 old men, a lot in different live streams talking about artist culture. I think Gary will probably agree with me on this. I've always hated the idea of artists as having their own kind of subculture, because I actually look at kind of art the way that I think Walt and his animators did, which is, it's a blue collar job. You clock in, you do a technical work, you clock out, you go home, you have a wife, you have kids. It's not like you wear a collar and a tie and slacks, but it's that mentality of, hey, I'm not an artiste. I am just a normal guy doing a technical duty and getting paid for it. That's it. There's no subculture associated with that. And I think if you look at Disney now, especially their documentaries, were if you compare a Disney documentary from 40 years ago, you're going to have a very eloquent, well-dressed, well-kept man talking, where they say, well, in developing the multiplane camera, the first thing that we did was have to ask ourselves, blah, 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 blah. Now you fast forward to today, and I'm not kidding. I don't want to sound demeaning, but this is true. You can go to any Disney park where there's a documentary, and it's like, now watch this documentary on Star Wars Land, and you're gonna have some effeminate 22-year-old soy boy who's like, oh my god, like, growing up, I totally love Disney. Like, my goal was to make an inclusive experience, and I'm just like, you totally buy into this culture of artiste and creator, and that, by stacking your company with nothing but those people, that's had a detrimental effect on it as a whole. So going back to like the Star Wars Land, last year when we were at Disney World, we were seeing a preview of it, and I told Mark, I was like, next year when we go, I'm just not thrilled about it at all, and it has to do with a lot of things that I had suspicions of, and they were confirmed recently. Like we were watching the Disney food blog, and they literally just talk about food at the Disney theme parks. And one thing she said, I went to get a meal for kids, and their kids' meal was literally a shrimp pasta. And she's like, I don't think you get kids. And she said she talked to a cast member there, and they're like, oh, we wanted to have it be as true to Star Wars experience as possible. So we wanted to have even a kid's meal look exotic. And she was like, or maybe you don't understand kids, because it doesn't matter how exotic it looks. If it's not mac and cheese and chicken tenders, they're not going to eat this. And so I think a lot of their priorities are just back asswards because of their corporate culture as it is right now.
No, it's interesting. What do you think, Gary? Are you blue collar?
I don't know what I am.
Okay.
I'm just a guy.
Metaphysically wrinkle free.
Yeah, metaphysically wrinkle free. Yeah, no, I get Tim's point though. Even though I'm not an artist. Joe says back in the day, lefties hated Disney for being too conservative and preferred the subversiveness of Looney Tunes. That's true. That is true. Anybody else got closing comments here before we get out? Anybody else? No.
Nope.
All right.
No,
well,
good.
Great show,
no
guys.
one want to do a Donald Duck impression. You're all cowards.
How's that?
Yes! I'll do it.
All right. Go ahead, Booster. That was hard. Booster, what did I tell you about pornographic material on my show? I told you.
I apologize.
All right. But anyway, guys, thank you very much. This is a great show. I think we covered the subject really well. There was a lot of knowledgeable people here. I actually learned some stuff, which is always awesome. And it was a great group of people to come in and talk about it. And do keep in mind, we do TFT every week, which this is a more open-ended thing, right? When we do our comics news today, of course, that is intentionally there to talk about the news of the day, pop culture, comics, and stuff like that. And of course, you're welcome to come join us for that. Just hit me up on my Twitter or Facebook. And of course, Fanspeak is more about doing interviews, although we'll do those here in comics news as well. We do have all our different products and stuff that we try to, or content that we try to do. But the TFT here is one of those situations where we can sit and talk about things openly like this. And it's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it. I don't know what we're going to do next week, and maybe it'll come up during the week, something interesting like it did here this week with George, because this is the inception of this show today is George, actually, and his absolute hatred of Walt Disney. But anyway, we'd be very happy to have you guys come in and join us. Just hit me up on my Twitter and say, Chester, put me on the TFT show. Also, if you guys have ideas for us to do on the show, we'd love to hear them. We are really enjoying this series, and thank you guys very much for joining us as usual. But it's time to go. So we're going to turn it over to Dinale as well, and as usual, and listen to his words of wisdom.
Not yet. I got one thing to say.
All right.
Me. Now we come to the end of the show. MICKEY MOUSE.
Very good. That's your cue, Dinale.
All right. Awesome. No, I just got stuck in the moment. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tim Lim and Mark. Sorry that your cat ripped the jack out. I wish you could be here at the end of the show. But Thank you, Gary Shipman, for joining us all today for TFT, and Dr. Wright as well. Thank you, sir, in putting your input today for TFT and talking about Walt Disney. Tomorrow is going to be Comics News Today at 9 p.m. Eastern for our Californian peeps. Mm-hmm. We are there for you. We know you're in the front line to that left-wing state. Sure. But as always, your perception shapes your reality, so always make it a good one.
Namaste.
Namaste.
All right, later, folks. And make sure you check out the various things these guys doing, like Joe King, Packins Land Omnibus, and, of course, Tim Lim's always creating cool stuff. Make sure you check it out. Later.
Aloha.
Bye, guys.